Welcome everybody to the Victim Aftercare panel. If you've somehow wandered into the wrong panel and want to make a strategic exit, now would be a good time. But we have some lovely ladies up here, so even if you have ended up in the wrong room, it's nice to have you and we hope you like it. If you're in the right room, welcome. My name is Betsy Allen, and I'm a second year at Emory, though I'm still, I guess, in my first year trajectory in law school. I'm also completing my MDiv, so I'm in here this semester, but I'm excited to be back. So to introduce our panelists, we have Ms. Mary Frances Bowley on the end. She's the president and founder of Wellspring Living, an organization fighting childhood sexual abuse and exploitation since 2001. She has been a leader in bringing the fight against child sex trafficking to Atlanta and is a founding member of the Governor's Task Force for CSEC Victims. Bowley was appointed to the Governor's Commission on Domestic Violence in 2010. She has also received the Martin Luther King Community Service Award, the Daughters of American Revolution Community Service Award, and the Seroptis Ruby Award, the DDG Lifetime Achievement Award, and partner with Passion Conferences. Mary Frances is on the Advisory Council for Shared Hope International and Abolition International. Wellspring Living, under her leadership, shares their expertise with a variety of leaders and over 8 startup nonprofits interested in the issue of the sexual exploitation of children through their mentoring program. She is the author of A League of Dangerous Women and The White Umbrella. Mary Frances is married to her best friend Dick and has 2 sons and 2 grandsons. Dick and Mary Frances currently reside in Peachtree City, Georgia. Welcome. Our next panelist is Courtney Dow, who has her, I'm not sure what your CSE or CSE.
Certified Rehabilitation Counselor.
Thank you. She has her master's in education, and she's a certified rehabilitation counselor, the director of Nightlight USA, and she's an Atlanta native and graduate of Auburn University, there we go, with a master's in rehabilitation counseling. Ms. Dow previously worked at the International Labor Organization, a department of the United Nations, and has assisted victims of trafficking from the United States, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma, India, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Turkey, and Uganda through her work with Nightlight International since 2005. In 2008, she founded the Nightlight office in Atlanta, Georgia. Ms. Dow received Auburn University's Young Alumni of the Year Award in 2012. And I think we're going to be a little bit pressed on time at the end, so if we can hold our applause for a few minutes until the end of the panel. Not that we don't love them all. But Maya Hatzek serves as the Anti-Human Trafficking Director, the Anti-Human Trafficking Program Director with Tapestry Incorporated, a nonprofit social service agency that works with survivors of violence from the immigrant and refugee community. Ms. Hatzek designs and provides trainings and outreach to mainstream service providers, law enforcement, and community organizations on human trafficking on a local, statewide, and national basis. Currently, Ms. Hatzek works to establish collective relationships with other nonprofit organizations and law enforcement around the issue of human trafficking. In addition, Ms. Hatzek provides technical assistance to HHS Region 4 and ensures that HHS ORR recipients in Region 4 have a uniform response to human trafficking. Ms. Hatzek has written her non-thesis on the impact of immigration policies and tolerance of the sex industry on human trafficking in the European Union. She holds a master's degree in international relations and a bachelor's degree in political science from Georgia State University. Welcome. And our final panelist is Monica Modi-Khan, is currently the executive director for the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network in Atlanta. As executive director, Ms. Modi-Khan oversees, supervises, trains, and mentors pro bono attorneys who represent immigrant victims of violence. She received her BA from Rutgers University in 1995 and her JD from New England School of Law in 1998. Upon graduation, she was the asylum attorney at the American Friends Service Community, where she represented detained asylum seekers. In 2000, Ms. Modi-Khan continued to practice immigration law with private immigration law firms in Boston, Massachusetts. In 2005, Ms. Modi-Khan was appointed to the Director of Legal Services at the International Institute of Boston. With this position, Ms. Modi-Khan worked extensively with victims of abuse and trafficking. She has also trained law enforcement and judges, ICE and FBI, on how to work with immigrant victims of violence. Ms. Modi-Khan currently serves Board of Directors of RACSHA, an association of women lawyers RACHA, a Georgia-based nonprofit organization for the South Asian community. She is a member of the Georgia Association of Women Lawyers and has served as pro bono liaison of the Atlanta chapter She is served as pro bono liaison of the Atlanta chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Ms. Modi Kant has also appeared on local television shows in Atlanta, Georgia, speaking about the issue of domestic violence and human trafficking in Georgia, and has written many articles on human trafficking, asylum, and domestic violence in the immigrant community. Welcome. So I think the way that we're going to kind of spend the next hour or so of our time is hopefully each of our panelists will be able to share a little more information about what each of them do. And then we'll have some time for each of them to respond to some questions, and then hopefully some time for some audience questions in the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down and save them, and we can ask them at the end. So thank you. Let's see, Ms. Bowden, would you like to start?
So since 2001, Wellspring Living has been serving first women, and then in 2008 began to serve young girls. And when we first got started, we were working mostly with women who were coming from desperate situations, didn't even realize maybe what that core issue underneath all those problems were. And it wasn't long we realized it was childhood sexual abuse, but did not even realize how trafficking was a part of what we were working with, because we were pretty naive to the whole issue of trafficking. But our very first girl was a survivor of sex trafficking. She grew up in Roswell, middle-class America, trouble at home, ran away at the age of 16 with her boyfriend, who was 29, who took her out of state, away from anything that she knew, and he began to rape her and abuse her. And when he was finished with her, he shared her with his friends who raped her and abused her, and then he began to sell her for profit. So she felt she had escaped. She got to a bus, Greyhound bus, and traveled for 2 nights back to Atlanta, 2 days back to Atlanta. Got into Atlanta, met up with a friend who had a townhome on the Northridge Parkway, innocently moved in, not realizing that there was a whole network of traffickers on the prowl in that area. And she was lured in, drugged, again, gang raped, and then begun to be sold night after night. And escaped in the most unusual way. One of the buyers thought she was going to die, dropped her off at Northside Hospital. Or she may have been dead. The reality is that within 7 years of a child or anyone being lured into this industry, they're probably going to be dead because of the violence and all the things that go along with it. So early on, we probably didn't know exactly what we needed to be doing in serving these girls, but we learned that we had to, when you serve women and girls coming from such deep trauma, you have to understand the trauma, and you have to look at each person in an individualized way. You also have to look at their whole needs. And so we say we create an umbrella of comprehensive services for a girl to move her from hurting through this pathway of healing toward thriving. And so we're looking at her body, mind, and spirit. We want to see her become whole because, quite frankly, trauma has a terrible effect on the brain. If you look at brain scans, you can see a normal brain scan, and you look at one that's experienced sexual abuse, you will see that there are breakdowns in the pathways that should be crossing both hemispheres of the brain. They're broken. You'll see an imbalance. And so early on, we learned that we had to do therapy a different way. So we provide, the place of safety for them to live. We provide things to help them become healthy in their body and develop healthy eating habits and living habits. But that therapy is key because we know that just having a safe place to live doesn't lead them to having a life later. And so we look at what we call right brain therapy. Trauma is held on the right side of the brain. Your ability to talk about your trauma is on the left side of the brain. So if you've got this breakdown, you can never access what's really driving these kinds of vulnerabilities. And so as we work with the girls, it's very non-traditional. We're doing things like expressive arts, dance, music, poetry, things that access and activate both sides of the brain. There's a specific evidence-based therapy we use called EMDR, which is making movement cross from the right side to the left side. It can simply be that our therapists take a walk with our girls and let them talk. And as they're walking, they can access that trauma, talk about it, deal with it, and help move them toward healing. And what we've seen is remarkable results. As much as I can tell you the worst stories you could ever want to hear, I can tell you the greatest stories. I was just with one of our girls this week, and she's 16 years old. She was hurt first by someone in the near family or friends. That's where most of the sexual abuse happens, at the age of 10. Her mom was a smart mom. She got her right into therapy, but it was talk therapy. Didn't work. Things spiraled downward. She walked in our doors right after she had turned 15. And didn't want to be there because she thought it was just like everything else she'd experienced. But fortunately, through the therapy, she began to deal and really start getting better and seeing hope. We also provide a personalized education plan for our girls. So we have a virtual school and we have a teacher on site. They don't go anywhere to school, it's not safe. But we start them where they are, catch them up, and they can move in their own pace. And so this girl is smart. So she's going. I mean, every waking hour, every time she had free time, she was working on her schoolwork. She was doing it so fast that the coaches had to hide her books because she was going to finish high school before she even turned 16. I mean, she was just pushed and determined. One thing you'll find about the girls that we get the opportunity to service, they're survivors. To have survived what they've been through, they have to be smart, and they're very determined. So this girl was going at it full on. Her mom said, don't let her finish high school before she finishes the program. So she left with 1 semester left. She finished high school at a local high school. At 16, she enrolled in college and worked a full-time job. So you're talking about a girl who, at the age of 10, this began, age of 15, 2 more years, she could have been dead. Now her dream is to be an accountant, and she's well on her way. So I say to you, just as Catherine said, it's a heavy topic, but it's not one without hope. And providing a place where they can have a safe environment, and providing the right kind of education and the right kind of therapy. Medical science tells us the brain can be healed, and we've seen it happen. So that's the good news.
Thank you. Ms. Hassett, will you share with us what you do?
My name is Maya Hassick, and I work for Tapestry. So we're a nonprofit social service agency, and we deal with survivors of violence within the refugee and immigrant community. We started in 1996 as a project of different resettlement agencies. How many of you are familiar with refugees coming to this country and kind of being assigned to different agencies to kind of become self-sufficient and learn about life in America? Well, we were a program of 6 different agencies because there was no program for victims of violence specifically for these different communities. So we started as a project, and we had overwhelming number of individuals come to us asking for help. So initially we were working specifically with domestic violence victims and assisting them in temporary protective orders, assisting them with divorces, and assisting them with additional immigration issues that they were dealing with at the time. And as we were working with these individuals, we realized that there was something more to this story. Not everybody, but a few people. And as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act came out, we realized that, hey, some of these stories are not stories of only domestic violence, but actually domestic servitude, servile marriage, so on and so forth. So in 2004, when the government issued federal grants specifically for foreign-born victims of human trafficking, that's when we started working with them officially. But we were working with victims even before. We just couldn't put our finger on it. We didn't know exactly what it is that we were dealing with. So we actually got our own 501c3, and we are no longer a project. We are our own 501c3 and have been for quite a while. But we've been working with specifically victims of human trafficking since 2004 under federal grants. So all that talk about HHS, ORR, this and that during the intro, it was actually the federal government who supports us through their grants. And we are not a residential treatment program. Since we deal with different communities, we actually work with these different communities in providing different types of services that a foreign-born individual may need in this country. When I say foreign-born, a lot of people use the term illegal, and so on and so forth, but that's not the term that we use. We use the term undocumented. Maybe somebody that was brought into this country with a temporary immigration visa, a visitor's visa, fiancé visa that eventually expired, or an individual that was smuggled into the United States that didn't know that they needed documents to come in. They didn't know what was waiting for them once they actually arrived here. So we're working with these different communities and with our different allies. I think that at some point we work with every individual on this panel. So we work with, who's not here, SETPA. They provide specialized counseling for the Hispanic community. We work with Raksha. They provide specialized counseling for the Southeast Asian community. We work with GAIN, immigration, all of the issues that we have. I'm going to let Monica talk about that. We work with our domestic violence allies in accessing housing, emergency housing for the individuals that are rescued out of their situation. PADD, Partnership Against Domestic Violence, Fulton County, Gwinnett County, Women's Resource Center, YWCA, all of these different agencies. So if we work with these agencies, what do we actually do? Well, we do the case management. We are the liaison between different agencies. We are the central person. When an individual is rescued, let's say through a raid that law enforcement has conducted, most of the time it's federal law enforcement that we are dealing with. FBI, Homeland Security investigation. Sometimes we do get referrals from local law enforcement, but not a lot of them are trained on the issue. They don't know what to look for, and just like Mr. Olson was talking about earlier, you know, they may come across it. They know something doesn't look right, but they don't know it's human trafficking. So we do the outreach on that end to train local law enforcement, to talk to different nonprofit agencies, to talk to churches, to talk to students, to talk to anybody and everybody who is willing to listen and learn about trafficking, to know how to identify. So once a person is identified as a potential victim of trafficking, we are there the same day. We have our different speaking case managers on the scene. If we don't speak the language, we'll get interpreters from different agencies, somebody who we may have trained on the issue, and we will talk to them right then and there. We will not go into detailed questions. What happened to you? Tell me right now. How many times are you raped? Who is this person? We'll simply do our needs assessment. You know, what is your need? You know, is housing the first thing? Do you need to talk to your family? The victim is the expert of their situation, so we let them tell us what is their concern. We will go into specialized questions like, have you been hurt? You know, do you need to see a doctor? Are you feeling ill? And sometimes we say, are you injured? Through time, we have learned that, you know, some of the clients that we have worked with, they may have been injured, and their basic need or their, you know, thought process is, well, I guess my need is food and shelter, and they'll let an injury go by. They won't really think about it. And we had an individual that was assaulted that had her skull cracked open by the trafficker a few months before the rescue. And she was never taken to the doctor. The trafficker told one of the other victims to pour peroxide over her head. And then they put makeup on her and they forced her to go out there again a few days after this happened to her. So she was rescued through law enforcement. We interviewed her. We started providing different services. We didn't ask, specialized questions about any type of injuries. So we get a call a couple of months later. My head is really hurting. I think I need to see a doctor. Well, what happened to, or did you fall? When did it start? Well, it all kind of started, when the trafficker, when I tried to leave my situation and he got me and he beat me and he actually took an iron and hit me over my head and took the iron cord and, started beating me with it. It's kind of started then. And we never knew this happened because we didn't know what questions to ask. So as time went on, we know that these are some of the questions that we need to ask when we encounter somebody. And we act as the liaison between law enforcement, the prosecutors, and anybody and everybody that may be involved in the case. Different people are going to know different aspects of the case because we feel that, we have to respect the client's confidentiality. So we're not going to tell, the person that's doing the housing all the specifics of the case because that's not our place to do so. Our place is to find where they're going to be housed. Our place is to find long-term housing, to refer to GAIN for long-term immigration relief, to refer to different agencies for counseling, to take care of the foods. We are dealing with different communities, so specialized foods, specialized dietary restrictions. Is this person of maybe Muslim or Jewish descent? They might not eat pork, and they have different dietary restrictions in regards to diabetes or so on and so forth. So these are all the things that we take into account. And culture is something that we really have to be in tune with, the people's different cultures that they come from. How do I approach this person? Yes, counseling is really important, but we also need to know that, in this culture, if you offer somebody counseling, they're going to tell you no right away. Because maybe in their culture, the aspect of, getting counseling means that they're admitting that they're crazy. So these are the things that that our case managers work on. Offering these services again and again and again until they are ready to accept these different services. So I know I kind of went on and on and on, but just to kind of bring it back, and I apologize, I'm trying to show you different types of needs that, the clients that we deal with may have. So we have different types of programs. Obviously, our domestic violence program, our anti-human trafficking program. We even have a prevention program for new arrivals for the refugee communities. If you come to the United States, if you act in this manner, these are the laws of the United States. If you're abusive towards your wife or your child, you can lose custody. Defects can get involved. You can go to jail, so on and so forth. So we do a little bit of prevention, and we also do batterers intervention program for individuals that may have been abusive towards their spouse and their partner, and we have that every Saturday. What's great about that is that we have interpreters in different languages so everybody can access those services. That program is kind of court mandated, but people can come voluntarily. So a little bit about those programs. A typical type of case that we may deal with. Everybody's talking about sex trafficking. Sex trafficking, yes. In Atlanta, we see a lot of sex trafficking. Minors, adults, commercial sexual exploitation in brothels, truck stops, adult entertainment, in different houses, you name it, we see it. For the refugee and immigrant communities, what we see a lot of times, it's massage parlors for the Asian communities. We see, for Hispanic communities that we are serving, we see the residential brothels. We see a typical case would be somebody that is picked up, is staying in an apartment with a trafficker or trafficker's family member. A lot of the times they'll have different girls, and every trafficker will treat this girl as their girlfriend. The story that they get to hear is, we're here in the United States. I know I promised that you're going to be working as a nanny or in a restaurant as a housekeeper, but actually what I forgot to tell you is that you don't have documents, and I just found out that the only type of work that you're going to be doing is working in a brothel, and I'm so sorry, I know I didn't tell you about this before, but guess what? That person that smuggled us across the border, they're threatening our life. So we owe them $5,000. So you have to do this or they're going to kill my family, your family, and they're going to harm us. Do you want this to happen? And, thinking that they're in this, situation, they say, this is not the type of work I've ever done, I don't want to do this. And the trafficker breaks them down. They say yes, not really saying yes to that, but thinking that their life is in danger if they don't do that, they'll have different drivers come to the apartment. These drivers will take them to different apartments to serve different men. So this driver, it's in his interest to take this girl from an apartment to an apartment to an apartment because they're getting cut of the deal. Like Mr. Olson was saying, you know, there was a case that was prosecuted. The quota is, we had, most of our girls that we're working with, quota is 20 to 25 men a night. We had one case that was a quota of 100 and more men every single night, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter if they are ill, if they have an outbreak, if they have contracted an STD, they have to continue working. If they get pregnant, they have to get an abortion, or they do the abortion there in the apartment. So these are the quotas that we're looking at, and the driver wants to make sure that he goes above that quota, because out of that $25 that they're charging per customer, he gets $10, and the other $15 goes to the trafficker. The guy that's sitting at home that's making all of these arrangements. So he'll leave the girl with his cousin or his uncle, and they'll watch the girl, and he'll go back to Mexico, Guatemala, whatever the country is, and he'll bring another girl. He'll start romancing her. You know, we're in a relationship, come to the U.S., you know, I have to do some work, I'm going to be working as a painter, I'm going to be doing construction, you can work in this restaurant. He brings her, he puts her in a different apartment, away from this girl, so they never meet. And then he's telling her the same things. You have to pay for this debt, and lo and behold, they're in the situation for 4, 5, sometimes 6 years, thinking that, you know, they're paying this smuggling fee because they never see the money. They don't know what the money is, or when that they come close to, you know, paying off that smuggling fee, which doesn't exist. They're told, well, we're building a house for the two of us in Mexico, so, you know, we're almost done, and there's no house, you know. It's $1 million house that they're living with their families, that they're sending back home to the trafficker's mother, sister, niece, and the whole family knows about it. They know that once the girl hits the U.S., she's going to be sold into prostitution. So these are typical cases. And I also want to touch base on labor trafficking. We see that here as well. We had a case of day laborers that were standing in front of Home Depot looking for work. They were this Dominican male, or just imagine another country, you know, that speaks their same language, approaches them and says, hey, you know, I've noticed you've been standing here for a week now. It doesn't look like you're getting much work. Well, I have an opportunity for you to work in North Carolina. You're going to be working, you know, as a painter, he tells one guy, or you're going to be working, driving a forklift. You're going to get $150 a day, and we're going to take care of your rent and food until you're settled. So this is consistent work. The guy thinks, well, you know, I'm here to help my family. I've been standing here. Have not had any work, and this is the best opportunity that has come, you know, that has come to me in a long time. So the guy says, well, let me take you to your home where you're staying, the recruiter. We're going to pick up your clothes and we're going to leave right now. So he picks up 5 of these guys. He takes them across the state border, and this is an actual case. They stop at Wendy's. They say, everybody get out, go get something to eat, and then we're going to, you know, continue driving to Kentucky or wherever it is they're promising. So the guys are in there. They notice that this guy's staying outside, and there's an exchange of money with the guy that's supposed to continue the trip, driving them to the next state. The guys come out, oh, well, listen, this guy's going to be driving you to the place where you're going to be working. So they all get into the car, and they continue on their way to Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, all of these different states. Once they get there, guess what? They were sold into a gang. So they're not going to be driving a forklift. They're not going to be painting. They're actually going to be selling you know, these fake documents on Myrtle Beach. Are going to be selling fake Social Security numbers, legal permanent residence cards, and some of these guys are going to be driving these girls that are forced into prostitution, not on their own free will. They're beaten. They are, you know, their eyebrows are shaved. I say this because this is, you know, how this is a sign of shame in that culture. They're thrown out, you know, on different streets. They are being watched at all times, and if they don't meet the quota of selling these documents, they are beaten. And this is operated by a gang. Once prosecution was done and the investigation, we found out that each and every guy was actually sold for $100 to this gang. So these are the type of cases that we are dealing with. So I don't want to take anybody's time.
Thank you. If we have more questions, you can ask at the end. Ms. Dowell, will you share what you do?
Sure, yeah. I work for an organization called Nightlight International, and we started in 2005 in Bangkok, Thailand. And the individuals who started Nightlight actually came from another organization that was working in a different red light district in Bangkok called Pat Pong. And at Pat Pong, there's approximately 8,000 Thai women that are for sale on any given night, just within the couple blocks radius. But they were watching this other red light district called Nana, and in Nana there's probably estimates of about 4,000 Thai women that are for sale on any given night. But also in Nana there are children as well as women who've been trafficked internationally that were in Nana that were not in Pat Pong. So Nightlight started as a ministry, as an outreach to the Nana area, and after a lot of research, estimates show about 20,000 people that are actually for sale in the Nana red light district on any given night. And they come from not only Thailand, but also the children come from Cambodia, Burma, Laos, India. Adults come from Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Turkey, and Uganda. Uganda, actually, there's been a huge increase lately of trafficking into Bangkok and into, I think, Southeast Asia in general. So we started as an alternative employment program for Thai women who wanted to come out of prostitution. And so they started Nightlight Design Company Limited as a registered Thai jewelry business. And currently we employ about 55 Thai women who've left prostitution, who work full-time in our jewelry business. They work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and throughout the day they have classes. They can learn to play guitar. There's different therapies that we do as well with the women. They also started a child care program for children who aren't old enough to go to school. We also offer scholarships for the older children to be able to go to school. And those are for our Thai women. We also started doing outreach to the women who had been trafficked internationally. And initially starting with the Uzbek women, and now working with the Ugandan women, and we've been able to repatriate over 30 women back to their home countries over the past 4 years, I think. So we also have a prevention program in Thailand where our girls actually go to the province where they're from, which is very rural, and they share their stories of abuse and of exploitation, which is a huge deal when you talk about issues of shame, cultural shame and stuff. Often the women will just say, oh, they just made a lot of money and they sent the money to their family, and now look at how well off they are and how well dressed they are. But our women go and they share the truth about what they experienced when they went to the city to work. And every time they do that, there's approximately about 300 people that come and listen to their stories. And so our hope there is that we would discourage parents from encouraging their children to go to work in the city. So that's what we did in Bangkok, and I lived in Bangkok for 2 years. And so, but I'm originally from Atlanta. So as I came back to Atlanta, I started doing research on what organizations were here, and at the time what I found was that there weren't very many outreach organizations to individuals that were in the sex industry. So in Atlanta, it doesn't look the same as in Bangkok, but it is the same. I say it's the same with a different face. So in Atlanta, we're working with strip clubs, brothels. We talked about homes, trailer parks, wherever. Our red light districts in Atlanta look different. They're kind of spread out, but there's a geographical correlation to where there is adult entertainment. You can be sure that there's prostitution. You can be sure that there's child prostitution. You can be sure that there's sex trafficking going on there. What I learned was that the only people who knew the individuals that were in these industries were the police. And the police, their goals in infiltrating these industries are to arrest people and put them in jail, not to build relationships with them, not to get to know them and their families, how they got there, and to offer them alternatives. And so we started in Atlanta in 2008. We started with working with at-risk children who were living in one of the red light districts here in Atlanta. They were Latino, And we also started doing outreach where we would spend time on the streets, building relationships with people who were soliciting on the streets and men who were selling other women on the streets. We also spent time in strip clubs and brothels. And so as we spent time in there, as we learned more about what the issue looks like in Atlanta, we asked the very, very, very important question, what do you need? I love what Maya said. What did you say? They're the experts of their own
situation.
Their own situation. Yes, absolutely. And so we say, what do you need? Because oftentimes I think people who want to start up organizations, they assume the needs of the individuals rather than asking them, what do you actually need? A lot of times they'll just say, right now I want prayer. Okay, you need prayer. Well, we can give you prayer. And then it's, I need a job. And that's probably, other than, actually the number one request that we got is we're a Christian organization. We partner with a church, and the number one request that we got was, I want somebody to call me and invite me to church. Number one request. What they're asking for is not, I want the best church in Atlanta. It's, I want relationship. I want to be invited into a community that's safe. And so we started a mentoring program to meet those relational needs. We also do job preparation and job placement. Now, job placement, that's probably one of the most frustrating parts for us, is that these women need jobs. A lot of times, I would kick them over to Mary Frances in 2 seconds if there was room and if they were willing. But a lot of the women have so many responsibilities at home with their children, they can't leave and go into a program for an extended period of time. And so what they need, though, is they need a job. And when you're working with women who didn't graduate from high school, they have no marketable skills, the majority of them were trafficked into prostitution at the age of 12, 13, 14. So they don't even know how to survive in the straight life or in the square life. So there's this process that we spend a lot of time in, of the testing it out and then going back in, and then testing it out and then going back in. And every time they're just seeing, like, can I do this? Am I capable of doing this? I say the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And even though they hate the situation that they're in, they're not convinced that they can get out of it and really thrive. One of my girls who I've worked with for a while, she was sexually abused by her dad had schizophrenia, and so she was removed from his custody and put in the custody of her mother, where she was sexually abused by her and by people who would come over to their house to sexually abuse her. The earliest she can remember being sexually abused, she was 4 years old, which I hear often. Most of my girls say 4 years old is the earliest I can remember being sexually abused. What I hear them saying is, as early as I can remember, I was being sexually abused. So it most likely was before they were 4. Eventually, when she was 6 years old, DFACS, or it wasn't DFACS in Oklahoma, she's in Oklahoma, I don't know what it's called there, but the CPS in Oklahoma?
Child Protection Service?
Yeah. So they removed her from the home, and she bounced around from group homes, institutions, and foster homes, where she continued to be abused. I won't even get into the stories of the abuse that she experienced while she was in those places. Eventually, when she was 9, her father stabilized enough to regain custody of her, and then when she was 11, he passed away. She finished 4th grade. That's the last grade that she finished, and so at 11. She had to be sent back to her mother's care, where her mother's boyfriend at the time brutally raped her, and so she ran away. By the time she was participating in survival sex at that point, living on people's couches. By the time she was 13, she was fully engaged in prostitution. By the time she was 14, she was trafficked to Atlanta. By the time she was 16, she was running her own girls through a call-in service. And I met her when she was 22. She had 2 kids by that point, and she could not escape the cycle of exploitation. Even though she had tried multiple times, she could not get out of it. Today, and this is a lot. This, like, I'm not going to get into all the ways that we assisted her, and that she is a fighter. She did most of this herself. We just gave her alternatives. But she now has her GED. She went and received her CMA, Certified Medical Assistant certification, and now she is working at a rehabilitation facility in Douglasville. And her little girls are now old enough to be in school, which is crazy because they were like 1 and 3 when we first started working with them. So like Mary Frances said, we hear a lot of horrible things. There are times when I'm just like, no, I don't want to hear anymore. Like, I don't want to hear anymore. But the thing that keeps us going is the one girl, and then the one after her, who, where there is hope, and where there is victory, and where there is joy, and where there is life transformation. And I believe personally that all of our women and men are at some point in exiting the sex industry, whether they're just at the beginning of exiting or they're getting closer to exiting. And so we believe that unless they die, that there is hope for them to have transformation. So.
Thank you.
Oh, and I guess I should say, now I oversee our U.S. operations, so I oversee what we do in Atlanta as well as Branson, Missouri, and Los Angeles, California.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ms. Modi Khan, will you share a little bit about GAIN and what you do?
Okay, sure. So GAIN was established in 2005, the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, by a partnership of law firms, King & Spalding, Alston, Sutherland, McKenna, Aldridge, the big law firms here in Atlanta, who really wanted to give attention and their pro bono expertise to immigration cases, specifically asylum cases. Atlanta is probably the worst place to file for asylum. The immigration court is the toughest. The national rate of granting an asylum case is like 37%, close to 40%. Here in Atlanta, it's 7%. So that's when a lot of the law firms were wanting to offer pro bono attorneys from their firms who normally work on bankruptcy cases, transactional cases, corporate cases, litigation cases, and give them an avenue to help somebody from the immigrant community, access their immigration relief if they could. How many of you know what asylum is? When you fear persecution in your home country, you can't go back because you're afraid of the government or a group that the government can't control. A great example of that right now would be Syria. So that's a case. If we had a Syrian national here afraid to go back home, the lawyers would help them file for asylum in a proactive way or in a defensive way if they were already caught in an immigration court. After that project became successful, in 2009, we heard from Tapestry, we heard from law enforcement, we heard from other groups saying, we need this same project that you have for asylum seekers for victims of human trafficking or domestic violence, because we have all these cases and we have no pro bono assistance for them. There's a few immigration lawyers who will charge maybe low bono, or some attorneys who will take a stab at it, but we need an organized system. So in 2009, we thought, okay, let's try it out and see what happens, and we thought we'd have maybe 24 cases, because I know you had a backlog of 24 cases, so we thought it would cap there. The first year, we had 53 cases. Every year, it kept increasing and increasing. This last year, we probably had, your trafficking cases were 144, so we had those, plus a lot of other folks, and this last year, in 2012, we served 275 cases. So what we do is we match up each case with a volunteer lawyer from the big firms in Atlanta, and at GAIN, we provide the supervision of the cases. We provide if they have technical assistance questions, like, I have an application, I'm working on it, can you look it over before it's filed? Yes, we at GAIN will go ahead and we'll do that. We also, if they're having difficulties with the client in communicating, we set that up too. So we really just take care of the immigration expertise. But also what we end up doing on the side is if they have other needs, we also make sure that's coordinated too. If they have a family law issue, if they have a criminal issue, if they're, needing to be in a prosecutor's office to tell their story. We work with Tapestry as well to make sure everything is consistent. The one thing that I really want you all to take away from this is when you work with a case where someone's been abused or trafficked, it doesn't just end by providing services. We really have to work together. So everything that every individual's organization does on this panel is key to making our case a successful one. We can't just say, okay, go to church and you'll be fine. That's not the case. It has to be a combination of church, therapy, job placement. I think job placement is really huge because once you start, making money and taking care of yourself financially, you feel very empowered and you feel like you can conquer the world. And when you have responsibilities of children in this country, children in the home country that you were taken away from, your goal as a parent is to provide for that. So we really want to maintain that we have holistic care, and that's very important with that. So as an attorney, I think, working with the big firm attorneys, holistic care is not really something that's on their mind. They just want to go in, fix the problem, get the client what they need, and then withdraw, and then that's it. But really, what we do in our trainings is every training we do with Tapestry. We do with, cultural competency expert, because it's really important for the attorney to know that by getting the client their immigration status, you're empowering the client. And so you have to do so in a sensitive, respectful, empathetic way. And that's probably the biggest lesson that we do have to teach a lot of our attorneys, which is very difficult because, there's no class in law school to teach you how to empathetically work with your client who has 1,000,001 issues, and you're just there, trying to navigate the way for them. So I know we have a bunch of law students here, and, if we had a class like that, I would love to teach it, because that really is one lesson you don't learn in law school. When my first case that I took, you were going over my biography. I frankly forgot everything, and I was listening to you like, oh yeah, I wasn't a detention attorney. I forgot that. That was 15 years ago. But what I remember is, working in a detention center, a lot of my asylum clients were detained once they were brought in. Well, the one thing that they wanted while they were in detention was some sort of connection to their home country. And believe it or not, the connection, we had a lot of clients from Sri Lanka, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Sierra Leone. At that time, Sierra Leone was a really rough place in 2000. Somalia, which again has become a really terrible place. But the one thing that connected them, which really blew my mind, was Bollywood. They all watched Bollywood movies. So I tried to. Now, I went above and beyond being a lawyer for them, and I talked to the warden and was like, can I just bring Bollywood movies that you can just put on the screen and everybody can watch it? It doesn't matter if they're from Sri Lanka, India, or even if they're from, Kenya. That's something that they can relate to. And it just, the warden was looking at me like, okay, you're a lawyer. Why are you advocating to have Bollywood movies here at the detention facility? But just doing that was, something that helped them heal and helped them get through their situation while their case was pending. So my point in telling you that story is, as a lawyer, when you do represent our cases, or when you're working with a victim of domestic violence, with a victim of crime, you do have to sometimes be their therapist. You have to be their friend. But also bring it back to what you're really there for, because I've also seen a lot of attorneys kind of go crazy and be like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to make sure they get their kids to, and you have to also bring it back home and remember why you're really there to help them, because it's really easy to get swept away in everything that they have to do. And it's also important to connect with each and every one of these organizations so that you can provide holistic care. Because I couldn't do what I do without everybody doing expertly what they do. And that really is important when you're holistically caring for one of our trafficking victims. Maya went over a lot of the cases that we see, so I'm not going to really go into that. The one thing I wanted to mention is a lot of our cases are high-profile cases that the U.S. Attorney's Office is prosecuting. The case that Maya mentioned with the iron to the head, that case was a huge trafficking ring, the Cortez Mesa case, and that was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and even though Gain wasn't really involved in that aspect of the case, we did try to help the clients get ready for, being a witness and testifying in front of their trafficker what had happened. And I remember what some of the victims were so scared to even go on that they would not go on until Maya was there. And Maya worked with them, and I think you had to say some prayers and just really work with them and get them kind of zoned in on what they had to do. So, again, that's where we all work together, and that's where we take care of the clients.
I just want to say, and Gain
yeah.
protected the confidentiality of victims when the T visas were also, while they were working on the T visas. As you know, caseworkers a lot of the time don't have the same confidentiality that attorneys do. So everything we write down in our notes can be subpoenaed in these high-profile cases. So we made sure that the attorneys were the one asking those questions, so that their privacy is protected, and that there's not a defense attorney on that stand asking them, well, you told Maya this, and then you're telling me now this. And all of us can get confused and can say certain things, but if they tell Monica that, or Alpa, or any of those attorneys, the defense cannot get to that information.
It's a lot harder. So that's just an example of coordinated care. We have to really meet with each other and be like, okay, this is the case. We need to protect X, Y, and Z. We need to do X, Y, and Z. Let's do this together. And, figuring out who's doing what, but doing it in a coordinated effort.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have a couple minutes before we move to audience questions. So I just had a couple questions here to go over. And if everyone wants to answer a question, that's fine. Or if one or two of you feel more comfortable or have more expertise with any particular
Well, you have a list of questions, so
yeah.
maybe we should divide it up.
Oh, we can do that
Being
too.
that we have 10 minutes.
But do you believe that there are any public misconceptions about human trafficking in Atlanta or human trafficking in general? And would you care to maybe enlighten us?
Okay, I'll just jump in. Misconception, everybody thinks that human trafficking is like the movie Taken. You have to actually physically be kidnapped, you have to be chained to the bed like Taken 1 was. It's only sex trafficking. The fact of the matter is that it's not always force that's keeping somebody there, but the actual psychological coercion that's even stronger than being held tied up to a bed, being locked, tied to chains. And the psychological coercion is so strong that people stay in those situations a lot of the time. And I think what's so sad is that a lot of people are asking, well, why didn't you leave? The door was unlocked. He went to the bathroom. Why didn't you get out of this situation? And it's just not as simple as that.
Thank you. What, if anything, do you think current law students and practitioners can do to combat human trafficking in Atlanta and more broadly?
Well, through us, you're able to volunteer and work with cases. So if you want that direct impact, we do pair law students with attorneys who do want to work on asylum or human trafficking or domestic violence cases. So that's a concrete way. But also, just being here, spreading the message, going to symposiums like this, and letting others know that it is a problem. I mean, we started this, Maya, in 2009, and the interest and the I guess the media and the attention that it's getting from just the past 4 years has increased threefold, I would say. I feel like, I'm talking about human trafficking at least 3 times a month, whereas before it would be maybe 4 times a year.
What advice would you have to give someone who's interested in addressing human trafficking through a job like yours one day? Monica, yours is probably, or who's Monica?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yours you can call me Monica.
Yours is probably most relevant to many of the law students, but I think some of the advocacy and other work that you do is also interesting.
Well, I think the most important thing, if you're wanting to be involved in this particular issue, is to understand the girl, the victim, the survivor. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to go to the darkness before you can even realize what you could do to help lead them toward a light. And
I think that is the challenge, because a lot of people kind of touch their toe in the water and they'll talk about it, but so many people that are talking about it have never met a girl. And it's so different, because when you see them, you know they're worth it.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear their stories, it rips your heart out. That's good, because we live in this little fantasy world that everybody has the same experience I do. And so the perception, the misperceptions are out there because we've never got to know the girl. And I think that it's important that you know it's not just one segment of the society that's touched by this. I mean, it goes from high level, socioeconomic, down to the lowest, but it's more in the middle and up than it is what we think it is. And you just need to get to know them. And I think when you get to know them and you know what your passions are, you know what your interests are, there's a lot of creativity in you. You wouldn't be here. You'll know what to do. I think that's the biggest thing. You know, people say, what should I do? What should I do? And I can give you a list of 100 things, but you will know. And your idea can be much better than anything I would come up with.
And I want to piggyback on what you said. Oh, sorry. What you had said, you can't just dip your toe in it and do something. You really have to submerge yourself, because, you know, these cases take a lot out of you. You can't just half-ass defend somebody, you know, for lack of a better word. You can't just, you know, kind of say, oh, I'm going to just help somebody and expect that that's enough. You know, the coordinated care is key, but also what I see with my attorneys, and I can give you an example of that from just this past week, and this goes with any nonprofit work. When you're working with housing, you know, clients, not just, it goes with any nonprofit, you know, working with those in need type of work. You really have to put yourself to where that client is and meet that client. Take those extra steps to really find out their